All right, we'll call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. Our last meeting of 2020. I should rephrase that. Our last televised council meeting for 2020. We do continue to meet for the next week or so. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I would ask that we just make a couple of changes, and that is that we move the, under reports and recommendations, that we move the e-bus as well as the recommendation to council of the appointments to the Bridgewater Anti-Racism Task Force up to be the two first items under reports and recommendations, so that people aren't having to wait in what are really not the most comfortable seats in the world there. So with those changes, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. To Mayor Tanner, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Any announcements from members of council? Anything upcoming? We have the Jack Frost scavenger hunt is still ongoing till the 20th of December. So you can check out the town's Facebook page or the website for information on that. There's been a lot of activity in Glen Allen Park too around the gnomes that have been hidden along there. And of course a reminder that a big thank you to Councillor Frazier and her team for the downtown, which looks amazing. We've got the wreaths all along King Street, and then we've got all the planters underneath. We've got, of course, Candy Cane Lane, Santa, all the snowmen around town, and the 4-H community forest as well, up by Veterans Memorial. So check that out, please. And we'll go right down to staff introductions. We've got some staff here, so I'll call on Lynette to come down and introduce some members of her team.
Perfect. So we have 2 new staff members to the Des Brisé Museum. We welcomed Kara Highfield onto the museum team as a museum developer. She joined us late in August, and she brings a wealth of experience and a very diverse background, and she's going to share with us now just a little bit about herself, what she did preceding this, and how she still actively participates in her community. Well, I will talk on her behalf because she's still muted. I see her up on the screen there. So Kara has been a ceramicist, professional ceramicist for over 10 years now. So as an entrepreneur, she wears a whole bunch of different hats, and she works with the museum in terms of our exhibits, working with our artists, working with our gift shop, working with our rentals, and programs on site. Additionally, she has sat on numerous boards, one of which she still works with the Lunenburg Public Gardens. Some of you may actually know her because she worked with the town last summer. She covered our garden coordinator for the town of Bridgewater's maternity leave. So we're really, really happy to bring somebody in who we've already had a little bit of experience with and knows our recreation department, members of our planning department, and is actively involved with the community at large, and is working, you know, with, right now our museum is exhibited over 70 artists, so it's really amazing to have her with her skill set. I'm going to move on to Katrina Swift. Katrina joined us at the beginning of August, or mid-August there. Katrina, again, comes with a wealth of knowledge. And Katrina's unmuted, so I'm going to let her speak to her experience and what she does on Tancook, as well as her educational background.
Hi, I'm Katrina. I'm very washed out of this video. I live on Big Tancook Island. I have a master's in archives and records management from UCD in Dublin. And I am involved in the community on Tancook. I'm a medical first responder and a volunteer firefighter for the Big Tancook Island Emergency Response Association. And I'm also the secretary for the Big Tancook, for the Big Tancook Island Emergency Response Association, as well as a committee member on the Rec Center Committee. I take care of the collections and the artifacts at the Des Brisé, as well as the administrative tasks, as I am the museum administrator. I forgot to say that.
That's perfect. Katrina's also working on, in her own community in Tancook, of creating a repository for all of the stories, the biographies, and the background of the residents of that island. Yes, so she's very much engaged. Anyways, thank you for meeting our team, and we hope if you haven't met them in person that you come by the museum any day, Monday through Friday, noon to 4, and meet the staff on site and see what we have going on.
Do you want to give a little pitch for the current exhibit that's there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, why not? So currently, right now, we have Wonders. It's an exhibit by Astrid Pickens and Gary Selleck, and it's a wonderful, as the name suggests, exhibit. It has a whole bunch of felted creatures, animals within the space, as well as a collection of watercolor and acrylic paintings. Everybody who's come in has been sort of enchanted and enthralled with it. So if you get the chance, please try and come by before Friday, as it's wrapping up this week. Every month the museum hosts a new exhibit. So excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I will then invite our Director of Community Development to come down and introduce our Engagement and Communications Officer for the Energized Bridgewater project.
Thank you very much. This doesn't work. Okay, I wanted to introduce to you Barb Shaw, the Energized Bridgewater Engagement and Communications Officer. So Barb started with the town and with the Energized project on November 12th and quickly has been getting her feet wet. In fact, she was facilitating a public meeting on renewable energy within her first 5 days. So no sitting around for Barb. We put her right into the thick of things, and I'll let Barb just give us a little bit about her background. She moved here from Ontario, has connections to Nova Scotia, and had been living here through the summer and on and off previously, but I'll let Barb provide those details.
Thanks, Jessica. So thank you, Mayor Mitchell, and to members of council and to staff. First of all, thank you for providing such a warm welcome to your team. So I've been a journalist for well over 20 years. I love telling the stories of ordinary Canadians doing extraordinary things, which is why the Energized Bridgewater project really caught my attention. I've worked in film and television, had some fun working for William Shatner's company, Cord Digital in Toronto, where I ended up with a Gemini Award. And over the past 10 years, I've been working to support small businesses and not-for-profits in rural Ontario, really focusing on economic development in a rural context. And I had the pleasure of moving to Baxter's Harbor part-time a few years ago over on the Fundy Shore, and now I make that my permanent home between there and Bridgewater. So again, thank you so much for welcoming me. This is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I look forward to making history with this project.
It's exciting. Welcome.
Thank you, Barb. Yeah, and just, so Barb's here on a 2-year term as our engagement and communications staff for the project specifically, and working very closely with Patrick on all things related to Energize, because it's fairly large, so it's not a side of desk type of
No.
part, so we're thrilled. Thanks, Barb.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, Barb. And then finally, for staff introductions, I'll turn it over to our CAO to introduce our grant coordinator.
Okay, Allison should be there. We hope. Yep, there she is. Good. So Allison has been here for about 3 months with the town of Bridgewater as our grant coordinator, and anyone that meets Allison will understand that she has a love for community, placemaking, and innovation. She's a graduate of Dalhousie University, and she has spent some time working in project management in Sault Ste. Marie, where she worked for a nonprofit organization, Destination North, and a developer, River's Edge, to organize and launch an award-winning community economic development project in brownfield development across northern Ontario. And that included the creation of a mill market, a year-round farmers market, one of the smallest science centers, and she's also been involved in skills training programs for organizations as well. She returned to Nova Scotia, and she spent the past 3 years working for the helping revitalize the Halifax Brewery Farmers Market Cooperative, bringing it back to life and becoming a cherished community hub. And I believe Allison, I'm speaking for Allison, but I believe she's thrilled to be here working for the town of Bridgewater. And I can say she's a digger, looking for funding opportunities for just about everything we do, and both operating and capital. So we're really happy to have her join our team, and she's a great addition.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. That was an excellent summary. I don't have too much to add, but it has been a lovely 3 months, even though I'm back in Halifax right now. And I hope that I get to come and join you guys on Thursday, but potentially in the new year. And I can definitely report that in the last 3 months, I have only met the nicest humans. So you're in good hands with the staff at TOB.
Well, welcome to all our new staff. We have exceptional staff in the town of Bridgewater. I think those exceptional staff then attract exceptional staff. So when you hear people applying for jobs from across the country to come to Bridgewater, it's not random. It's I believe it's people seeking out these positions because they know that it's going to translate into something really exciting and things are going to get done. And so welcome to everybody. We look forward to some pretty cool years ahead. And I just hope everyone kind of stays safe until the new year and everything will hopefully settle down. It's so hard to introduce staff virtually. Just makes me sad. Plus there's no cake that way. It's heartbreaking. Okay, we're going to go down to our delegations. We have representation from Summerland Properties and Door Construction Limited. And so in a moment we're going to turn the virtual podium over to them. Just a reminder that our delegation policy allows for up to 10 minutes for the delegation to address council. That doesn't include the questions that council may have. And also, council doesn't make decisions based on information we receive tonight from delegations. This will be something that we kind of take back, give us a few weeks to kind of digest it, ask questions of staff or of the proponent. For this one, I'm sure there will be many, and then this will come back to council early in the new year for some decision making. So with that, I will turn that over to, I guess, Elizabeth Barry and the representation from Summerland and Dora. The floor is yours.
Sure, thank you very much. So I'll just start with sort of a verbal presentation first, and then I'll share my screen so you can see some of the concepts that I'm speaking to. So, Mr. Mayor and honorable members of council, thank you for giving us some time to speak tonight. My name is Elizabeth Barry. I am the Director of Multi-Residential with Summerland Properties, and with me I also have our President, Donald McDonald, and our CFO, Jamie Miles. We are very pleased to be before you today to discuss the development at 654 Glen Allen Drive. Prior to today's meeting, you would have been provided a rationale letter authored by myself that outlines our organizational team and our development concept for this property. Dora Construction and Summerland have participated in many successful projects throughout the Maritimes and locally in Bridgewater as well as along the South Shore. Most recently, our team has been involved in the development and current build out of the new townhomes being constructed on Oakland Drive here in Bridgewater. Many of our successes have come from a collaborative partnership, and because of this, we see this meeting as the beginning of a partnership with the town of Bridgewater to bring affordable quality homes to the area. The 14.68 acre site that we're speaking about lends itself to a medium to large scale development that we see as a solution to the region's housing demand. Currently, Bridgewater has a vacancy rate that hovers typically around 1%. Couple this with increasing rental rates and you have a challenging market for residents to find suitable housing options. This is not news to you, I'm sure. With the build out of this phase development we are proposing, we will be introducing approximately 400 multi-residential units to the local market over the course of 3 to 4 years. Ranging in size from 650 square feet to 1,500 square feet across a number of different product types and a number of different buildings, we see this development as an affordable and mixed income model. As community builders, we at Dora and Summerland understand that a development of this size will have to be impactful and inclusive. So we were very intentional in how we approached this design. We feel strongly about the parcel and its possibilities. It's adjacent to the Centennial Trail. It's within walking distance to the large amenity nodes within the town. It's across the street from a beautiful outdoor community amenity. And with its close proximity to transit, we see this property as an opportunity to appeal to many community members. In imagining the possibilities this site presents, we had to take some of its challenges into consideration as well. But where we originally saw challenges, we now see opportunity. Specifically, that opportunity is to intentionally allocate a portion of the development to affordable rentals. In the rationale provided to you, we quoted about 10% of all units would be deemed affordable, as defined by CMHC. However, we are pleased to present our concepts today that show 13 to 16% of the development as affordable. The promise of these affordable units comes from an internal effort to curb the affordability crisis in our province, while also negotiating a way to make this site developable. The outstanding cost recovery charge for the upgraded infrastructure in this area that has been associated with this piece of land for over a decade is limiting the growth of the area, and we feel that this proposed development could solve this. Ensuring that this bracket of rentals are built into the development allows us to achieve what we are setting out to do as a community builder, while sustainably injecting affordable units into a mixed income model. This mixed income approach will not only appeal to more people within the community, but it will also drive the success of this development. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the two concepts that we'll speak to today. And you'll note that I called them concepts. So we've been working with a designer to be very intentional about how we're laying this site out for a number of different reasons. But up on the screen, you will see Scheme 2. I'll note that we had many schemes, and we've narrowed it down to these two to share with you today. So Scheme 2 is a total of 393 residential units, of which 62, or 16%, will be allocated as affordable as defined by CMHC. The north section of the site has 3 62-unit apartment buildings that are either street or park facing. Parking for residents will be a mix of underground as well as surface stalls. The south half of the development is a bit more of a mix with one 46-unit apartment building, a 62-unit apartment building, and a 78-unit apartment building, along with 10 townhomes and 11 semi-detached homes along the south property line. Flipping over to Scheme 3, and I can flip back and forth when we open it up here, but just to give you an idea, Scheme 3 is very similar to Scheme 2, except we tried to be a bit more efficient in the construction of the larger apartment buildings to the north. The scheme offers a total of 469 units, of which 62, or 13%, will be allocated to affordable as defined by CMHC. The north section has one 104-unit apartment building and one 96-unit apartment building, while the south section is virtually identical to Scheme 2. Important to note, in both schemes, we've supplied a 50-foot wide road that will be built to public road standards that goes through the site to allow access to the town-owned lands to the east of this parcel. This, along with solving the cost recovery charge, was an integral piece of the design considerations that we made to make this parcel developable. To date, we've had a number of conversations regarding this piece of land with both the current owner as well as the town's planning department. We are very optimistic that we're the right developer for this property and truly feel that we can bring a positive impact to the town of Bridgewater through this development. We are very much looking forward to working collaboratively with council and town staff to bring this development to life. Our rationale further explains our solution-driven approach to this challenging site, but should you have any questions now, we can open it up to the floor for questions.
Wonderful. questions from members of council? There's quite a bit. Councillor Thorburn.
Just one. It's nice to see affordable housing units on there, the 62. They'll be an integral part of that project. And will they be on the first phase of that, or when in the phase would those affordable houses be available?
Sure. So we haven't entirely defined the phasing of this project, other than we know that it will be over the course of a number of years. However, in both schemes, the affordable units can be found in the north section, which to date we have been saying that that will likely be the first phase of construction.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Are there questions from council? Can you just remind me, when we say if a unit is affordable based on CMHC standards, can you define that a little bit more? Maybe you don't have that information with you, but
sure. Yeah. No. They typically use a rule of thumb that we should all be, I guess, taking 30% of our income and using that for housing. So that's basically the rate that they use. So it does change depending upon the market, but it's essentially 30% of what's deemed to be average income.
okay.
Yeah, and this is Donald McDonald, the president of Summerlin and Dora, and just like Elizabeth says, like CMHC is different criteria, and we definitely are mindful of the different gauges that they use, whether it's the 30% figure or if it's 10% below the median income, or if it's a size requirement or cost per unit. There's different measures, but we're mindful of the engagement that we have to do with folks like yourselves and the community itself, just to sort of understand exactly what the Bridgewater market is, because every community in Nova Scotia has its different metrics.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else have questions? I think the only other question I had was, would the affordable units be intermixed among the other units, as opposed to just kind of putting them all in one spot, kind of highlighting, in fact, the situation that some people are in?
Yeah, I know, maybe Elizabeth, I can answer that one. The way that we look at this across communities in Nova Scotia, we believe to build a rich, vibrant, inclusive community is that you don't have the more affordable units segregated in one corner of the lot. We think they should be mixed through. It should be almost like Elizabeth used the words mixed income community. So there wouldn't be a differentiation. You wouldn't be able to tell where the affordable units were versus the market rentals. That would be our goal.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McDonald?
I assume that the road running through the middle would be turned over to the town at some point, but the gardens and park areas, would those be turned over to the town for maintenance, or would they be maintained by the property management or somebody else?
That's right. So the road itself, we, in a previous conversation with the planning department, chatted about this road being built to public road standards, so that yes, it would be turned over to the town to maintain. However, the rest of the property will remain private.
And this is probably a question for town staff, probably to our engineer. We require that road to be turned over? Is it because it's going to connect to a potential future street? I'm not going to make you come all the way down if you're just going to nod and say yes.
Yes, there's requirements for maximum distances between intersections. So
okay.
There is a requirement for a road within that development.
All right, so I'll just reiterate that for the public, just because they probably didn't hear that. So there is a requirement just for maximum distance between intersections, so we do require that. Councillor Frazier.
Yeah, I just had a kind of a question about more hypothetical, but I know concerning with our pandemic that we're going through, and the cost of building materials and prices. And I'm just wondering how, if you could make a comment with regards to how you feel that will impact the rental per unit, or do you feel that confident that it won't? I'm just curious as to, with your expertise, knowing what the rental units will be cost, and how the cost of building materials, I guess, will in the end, does it significantly increase the tenants and what they have to pay for rent?
Yeah, so I would say that it's one of the reasons why you'll see so much density on this site, is that we're cognizant that we sort of have to plan for the future. This is an almost 15-acre site, and so looking at the screen, you see a lot of green there, but we did want to achieve around 400 units, so that those incremental costs that we see now and really we see in the industry sort of cyclically over time can be blended across the units, and therefore it's not handed off to the end user as much as it might be would you see single family development occur here. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Donald.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We have to go through a development agreement on this property, so we would like to tentatively be planned to be starting this in the summer if everything went well on that end, and then it would be an opening sometime in late 2022. So hopefully by that time, I'm sure no one has a crystal ball, but everything should be stable and sort of relatively going well, and we're very optimistic about the future of not only Bridgewater, but the South Shore and all of Nova Scotia being a destination that people after the pandemic want to go to, and we're working on other strategies that would help in the cost of this construction development. We have a presence on the South Shore. We have an office open on the South Shore. We have another sister company that's going to be having a factory that's going to build off-site components for projects like this. So we're optimistic about the future, and we're wanting to be part of what Bridgewater is like other rural communities in Nova Scotia.
Councillor Thorburn,
just it's nice to see two driveways in there, or two roads. My question would be, there's one that's 50 feet wide, and the other one is 30. And I just want to know, why would there be different measurements for two main roads?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
So what we did was we built the 50-foot road that would be connecting the future development on the other side, and that would be a public road after it was finished. So that would be a public road that would be maintained by the town. The other roads would be roads that would be maintained by us after the development was built. That would be our intention. So they weren't built as town standards.
Okay, just a question.
Yep, that was a good question.
Yeah.
Other questions from the council? So this will be coming back to council in January. So I'll just remind council, if you have questions, either for our staff or for the proponent, then through the CAO, I would send those questions off, and we'll get answers as this comes back. And I'd like to thank you for Elizabeth for your presentation, and look forward to this returning in the new year for more discussion and see where it leads.
Us as well. We're looking forward to it very much.
Great. Thanks. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with you. We look to meeting you in person next time.
Yes, let's hope
so.
Great. Thank you. Our next item is the minutes from November 23rd, 2020 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions there? Hearing none, here a motion to approve the minutes.
I would so move we approve the minutes as presented.
Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor Caldwell. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We're going to correspondence for action, and we have a letter from the President of the Royal Canadian Legion, a request to waive banner installation and removal fees.
I should be excused from that.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who this president of the local branch is. Wayne.
Falls under my direction.
Wayne Thorburn. Thank you. Thank you for declaring conflict. So this does come almost every year. We have a policy where when we put up the banners and take down banners, that there is a cost because staff have to go and do that. So council has the opportunity to decide what it wants to do with this request. You can, we can provide a grant to cover the installation and removal costs from what is remaining in the grants organization's budget. Council can do nothing. We can maintain the charge.
Yep.
The floor is, yeah, the floor is open for discussion. Councilor Colwell.
What is the approximate charge?
Around $500, I believe.
$550.
Yeah.
$550.
$25 per banner.
So I guess for clarification, we're able to do an in-kind versus grant, so this would be classified as a grant.
This would be basically paying the cost to
Okay.
take the banners down, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor McDonald.
Is there a reason that we wouldn't refer it to the grant process?
You can. The intake period, I believe, has come and gone. There's actually, I think it's on this agenda, a recommendation about grants. So this came after that. But it doesn't mean council's not able to address it. You can address that. It just hasn't gone through that application and review process.
Yeah, so that's one of the possibilities.
Did we have a similar request from the Legion last year? And if we did?
I think did we preemptively address, I'm looking at Branch President Thorburn, because I do believe we waived it or covered it last year, but did we make a decision prior to the banners going up? Can you recall?
3 years ago, we...
Can you come down to the microphone, please? Thank you.
3 years ago, it was waived for us and for big brothers and big sisters, I think, at that particular time. And then we had numerous meetings, and we thought a fair price to put them up and take them down was $25 per banner. The request this year was brought forward because of the Legion's inability to fundraise, and it greatly impacted our budget. So that's the reason that it's requesting for this year. It's not, it was never intended to not pay the banners, but this was COVID year, and like I say, we have very little income. So that's why it was requested.
Thank you. Only time flies. Yes, so in the past we have
Would you like a motion?
Yes,
yes,
sure.
All right. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater waive the banner installation and removal fees for the Royal Canadian Legion branch number 24 and fund that through the grants organization's account.
I have a seconder. Councilor Conklin. Further discussion?
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We will welcome back Councilor Thorburn, and we'll deal with our 2 items that we've asked to move up. So again, I appreciate your indulgence on that. So perhaps we will deal with the anti-racism committee appointments, and I would like to recognize that Patricia Watson is here in person. This is the second time she's come for this committee. The first was to celebrate the terms of reference being approved, which was quite an important meeting. And I would say this one is just as important because this is appointing the people who will make up this committee that will begin to shape our path or form our path forward as we deal with this important issue. So this is really an incredibly important day. the terms of reference were giving our desire to make change teeth, but it's the appointment of members that's going to actually move that forward, because you can't do anything if you don't have people to drive it. So I will say, as we went through the people who had applied, and you can't pick everybody because the committee can only be so big, the variety of candidates was just amazing. You always kind of worry that people are burned out, or maybe what if you don't get any applications? It's volunteers are tired in this community, so it was inspiring to see so many people, different backgrounds, different ages. This is a very diverse committee. So with that, I'm looking for the discussion to start. If someone's prepared to put a motion on the floor, that would be great. Councillor McDonald, please, thank you.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater appoint the following persons to the Bridgewater Anti-Racism Task Force, each for a term ending on October 31st, 2023. Ahmed Hussein, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Alden Darville, Aaron Carr, Francis Kangada, Jan McKenzie, Jennifer Everest, and Patricia Watson.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Vergier. Any discussion? Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. I didn't even cry that time. Thank you. And thank you for coming, Patricia.
Thank you.
And for, Patricia was instrumental in moving us forward. We had a dozen meetings over the course of the summer, so Patricia hosted all of those. We used her Zoom account, so thank you.
Thank you, and have a happy holiday.
You too.
Thank you.
Care.
Our next item that we moved up was the e-bus funding options. So this has come forward. There's a few opportunities out there. I know people wondered why we bought gas buses. Why didn't we just go right to electric buses? And what we've learned, and it's the same as what Halifax has learned and other communities, is it's not so easy to just go out and buy an electric bus, because you have to build the infrastructure for it. You have to have someone who can repair it. The challenge we have in Atlantic Canada right now is nobody can repair an e-bus. You'd have to ship that off to another province to get fixed. And so then that becomes a very costly proposal, not to mention the expense of finding another bus to replace your e-bus while it's gone for weeks or more at a time. So I believe we have staff. Yep. Allison's going to come down Allison's over our shoulder and going to run us through the what's in front of us.
Sure. Hi again, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah? All right. So there's an opportunity to secure funding from the Federal Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program towards the purchase of electric buses for the town of Bridgewater. The Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines oversees the ICIP Climate Change Mitigation Substream, which supports large-scale projects that lower emissions and have public benefit and have project costs over $1 million at a 73% cost share. The town of Bridgewater didn't pursue funding under the initial call for applications, as the purchase of new electric buses didn't meet the $1 million threshold, and the substream is now closed. The town of Bridgewater has interest in two separate open applications, one for the LCLC's Deep Energy Systems retrofit and one for Nova Scotia Power's vehicle-to-grid technologies in provincial comfort sectors. So Energy and Mines has recently indicated that they support the request for purchase of electric buses through the ICIP funding for Bridgewater by combining a new request with one of the aforementioned applications. In order to access those funds, Energy and Mines has requested that we complete a feasibility study introducing the concept of the electric bus transit system, which they're willing to cost share. Staff don't have the skills or capacity to undertake a feasibility study, and we need to contract the services of a consultant to do that work. The cost of the feasibility study is anticipated to be approximately $10,000, with staff recommending that $2,000 to $5,000 come from the transit operational budget, contingent upon the Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines providing the balance.
Awesome. Questions for Allison or for other staff? Councillor Caldwell.
So what would be the estimated cost to the town of a new electric bus after the grants were accounted for?
That's a good question.
Can't remember the cost. $650. We would, go ahead.
Yeah, our director will come down and I know it's not nothing.
There's 3 staff here who could probably speak to it. But I was part of a conversation with a number of different organizations, and it varies. Around $1 million cost to purchase an electric bus, but this feasibility study will look at, that's a closer to a conventional bus.
Mm-hmm.
So what Allison and I learned in the conversation that we had with Department of Energy and Mines is that this feasibility study will really look at what other options there may be, and not just the one that we had been having other sort of more serious conversations with through a pilot project that Nova Scotia Power was trying to organize with some other municipal units that really hasn't gone anywhere. And that one had a price tag of about $800,000 to $900,000. So that would be, 77% funded, you said, through ISIP. So there'd be a balance of around $200,000 perhaps is what we were looking at in those conversations, but this feasibility study should really solidify those types of numbers for us and what the different options are in terms of what the different types of buses there may be. So is there an electric bus closer to the size of the gas buses that we just recently put on the road? Those sorts of things.
But fair to say that 10 years, 15 years down the road, we're going to probably be migrating to electric buses. Does this feasibility study that we do today, it still helps guide us for when that day comes, right? Like, we're going to need a feasibility study, whether it's the opportunity to buy a bus a year from now or 12 years from now, correct?
Correct, although I imagine it would need an update in 12 years because the technology is changing fairly fast, but it will provide a better estimate. Like, to date, we were comparing, we were very much in need, and Larry can attest to very much in need of having new buses on the road compared to the buses that we had been driving. And the level of infrastructure, the level of all the other things you need to support an electric bus was way more and more costly and more time consuming than replacing the buses that really needed to be replaced. And I recall from our conversations with council over the past number of years, we're like, these buses won't be electric, but the next one will be, is what I recall council saying at that time, or should be. And these buses have a lifespan of 8 to 9 years, 7 to 8 years. So that's sort of the time frame that we're hoping would happen. This gets us very much farther down the road of truly understanding how, so one of the questions that they asked is, how long is your route and how long will the charge last in an electric bus? So would we need to pause partway through the route to charge the bus? Those sorts of things are questions that we've never even begun to explore, because the larger question of how would you get an electric bus serviced sort of overshadowed some of the mechanical, like how it would actually run on the route. And what we understand from talking with Department of Energy and Mines is that this feasibility study would provide us with that level of detail that we've never been able, nor do we have the capacity to truly, as at the staff level, understand or communicate back to you. So.
Mayor Tanner.
So did I hear you correctly that after we get a feasibility study done, even after we get a feasibility study done, we wouldn't probably execute a purchase of an electric bus for 7 years? And I ask because your prior comment about how fast this technology is changing and so on sort of makes me say, well, why rush into this?
There may be opportunity to move it faster than what we have planned, which prior to the conversation that Allison and I had with Department of Energy and Mines just a couple of months ago, and some of the conversations that the mayor has had with the Minister of Energy and some other folks, there may be an opportunity to pursue one sooner than what we've planned, which is when the next buses, buses that we just put on the road, need to be replaced. So that's been what's in our plans to date. And so this feasibility study would be happening closer to the end of life for those buses, but there's potential opportunity arising faster than we had intended, which is why this is before you now.
Right, okay.
And that feasibility study would look at those issues like servicing and charge and all those things, so it will tell you whether it's feasible today.
Yeah,
Okay.
but my point was, if we're not able to execute the purchase of a electric bus for 7 years from now, or even 5 years from now, this technology is changing so quickly, that feasibility study would be out of date in a year or two, is my guess.
Yeah, and
But-
it would depend on if we got the funding through
Yeah.
the next
Okay.
stage.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of different
Yeah, I
opportunities
get
that are
it.
kind of percolating. This way,
Sure.
we would have the information to respond to those opportunities much faster, rather than, say, in a year's time, there's an electric bus fund.
Yeah.
And we would need to do a feasibility
Sure,
study
no.
at that time. So it will move us further down the road of understanding how we could electrify our bus fleet.
Sure. Okay.
Which we can't really, beyond some of the immediate and very obvious roadblocks that we have right now, we haven't been able to investigate further.
Can I ask a couple more? Sorry.
A couple more.
Yeah, can I have two more, maybe? Two.
Okay, 2.
Larry gets them this time.
Two questions, I guess. One, I assume if we went the route of electric bus, we would sell out one of our buses at least, get rid of one of our buses at least, potentially.
Potentially.
Okay.
Neither
So
of
it's-
us would give you a definitive answer on that, because
Oh, boy,
buses
you guys
are
are-
temperamental.
Okay, all right. Two, because of the dollar threshold of the feasibility study, I assume we can just sole source this one?
We would look for competitive procurement.
Okay.
That's our policy,
Sure.
right? So
Okay.
it'd be a $10,000 cost, even though ours might be 2 to 5, we'd still have to get quotes at least.
All right. And
Yeah,
what's
we'd get 3 quotes. We have
Sure.
gotten some names from the Department of Energy and Mines of people who would be qualified to undertake
Okay.
such studies.
And do we
So
know how quickly they can turn that study around?
We have not investigated further than, can you give us some names?
Okay.
That was 3 questions, but that's okay. I'll let the last one slide.
2.5.
Fast.
I know in speaking to various ministers or deputy ministers that the post-COVID recovery plan is so focused on green, that without saying it, I definitely got the strong impression that they are going to be looking for communities ready to quickly mobilize green, electric, sustainable solutions. So kind of like, and this is just me envisioning where they're going, it's kind of like that rapid housing where they're like, okay, here's the money, but you've only got a few months to put your name in the hat to draw the money out. If they came back a year from now and said, we'll pay for 90% of an electric bus if only you had this feasibility study, I guess that's what I'm envisioning. At the end of the day, council still has the hammer to say, even if it was paid for 90%, we still can't pay $100,000 on a $1 million bus. So this certainly doesn't, I don't want the public to think the feasibility study means that the next step is definitively getting an electric bus. It just gives us a little more knowledge to know whether it's something that we should even be considering. Based on your questions, and which were spot on, like if the technology is rapidly improving, then what do you get when you wait a year?
Yeah.
Other questions? Councillor Thorburn.
We're talking $1 million, and we were talking 73% funding, so we still would owe 270. Is that with or without partnering with NSPI?
So it depends on I don't want to speak for the director, but I know the one with the partnership that was referenced with Nova Scotia Power was that kind of that reverse charge, powering a building with the bus.
Right.
So their component to that wasn't necessarily the funding for the bus, but the funding for the other piece.
Which we're going to need anyway.
But yeah, if that's what we want, is to participate in something like that, powering a comfort center with an electric bus, which seems in a community that faces stronger and stronger storms, it seems like a logical step.
Yeah, and we did discuss this when we purchased the bus, because we had talked about that in detail of electric bus at that particular time, but it wasn't doable then, but now it's something we can work on. We'll see what happens.
Yep. Other questions from members of council?
Can I ask one more?
Yes, you can ask one more.
I'm on number 4 now. What takes the hit in the operational budget when we pull out 2,000 to 5,000?
So we have it's out of the transit account, and we
Right.
have some reduction in expenses because of COVID-19.
Okay,
So
perfect.
we do shifts.
Yeah. Okay.
There are days we didn't put the bus on the road.
Okay.
Great question. Any other questions? What is the wish of council? Yeah? Put it on the floor.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and commit $2,000 to $5,000 from the transit operational budget to undertake a feasibility study for the development of electric bus transit system in Bridgewater contingent upon receiving funding from the Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor Bergier, further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I will say that the province is, I've said this before, the province is extremely supportive with public transit. I just feel like our 2 buses that are running around the road now, those new buses, we wouldn't have those without the support of the province. So, while sometimes I can be outspoken and criticize perhaps other levels of government, I will say when it comes to public transit, I have nothing but great things to say about the province putting its money where its mouth is. Going back to where we were, kind of regularly scheduled agenda items, we'll have 10.1, which is our museum update. I'll turn it over.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. So I'm here to present on the 2020 year at the Des Brisets Museum. As many of you know, the museum acts as the first point of contact for newcomers and visitors to our area. It provides social programs and enables an array of resources. So if we go back to when Museum 2.0 was implemented back in September of 2018, we've realized many of the items that were under that umbrella. At that time, there was mounting pressure for change from the museum. So the museum was under threat, and town funding had been reduced by 50% from $159,000 in 2016 to $75,000, which was the current level that we're at. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that have happened in 2020 because we're very impressed with our outcomes. As well, again, just going back pre-Museum 2.0, we had about 3,500 visitors through the door. And in 2019, we had 8,700 visitors. And although 2020, we haven't seen nearly as many visitors through our door, it's very impressive the levels that we're still at, even though we were closed for 16 weeks. Okay? So part of what we've done is we've looked at the footprint of our building with the expanded amount of patrons coming to our site. We've maximized the footprint through taking down some walls. So when you entered the space itself, there were some walls that created a collection storage space. Many of you took a tour this week, but basically that doubled the open area as you enter for the rotating gallery. It cut down on pinch points and it created a much more breathable, welcoming space. This project was supported by our community partners, so it's incredible that our community got behind us. NSCC Heritage Carpentry, Level Up Construction, G Trucking, and Bucks Building Home Center all made this project come to fruition with very little impact or budgetary implications for us. All right. So that happened in January. We're very excited to have this open, beautiful, breathable space. Since then, we've undertaken recommissioning of the HVAC system. So we've had support through the engineering department, and there continues to be ongoing issues, including some active leaking. And I'll talk about that, but we are maintaining the building and taking care of the systems to the very best of our ability. We brought in a design consultant, and we're looking now at the research area, which is underutilized and has a very sort of the feel of a privatized office space, very institutional, and thinking about the conversion to a reading room, which there was previously in the museum, which would allow a space for people to sit, reside, use the internet, be able to log on to Nova Muse where all the collections are housed. As well, COVID has shifted many activities to our outdoor space. So we continue to look at that green space out back and think about how we can better utilize that beautiful area and the 22 acres of woodland gardens parks. So when we think about our collections and we talk about water potentially with our HVAC system, this last summer we did find some mold in our collection storage. This is a very big threat, and that was mitigated through the support of volunteers. So volunteers took the time to clean approximately 11,000 artifacts that we have in our collection. And they did this over the course of 3 months. So the museum was closed up until the end of June. We reopened at the beginning of July, and the site was managed by myself and the support of summer students, because we did not rehire for those positions until later in the season. So Katrina, who you met tonight, who does our archives and collections, has written a grant. She has applied to the museum's assistance program for rolling storage. This would increase our storage capacity by up to 30%, and it would also provide better access and simplify the storage and allow for us to more readily do collections reporting. And we're also looking to digitize many of our paper that we have on site. So we have original documents on site, and they are in no way preserved outside of the physical paper document. So digitizing them would allow for greater use of them by staff, by the public, and it would also allow for them to be safeguarded. So again, talking about our successes this year we've exhibited the work of 70 artists. We have one of the only formalized gallery spaces in Bridgewater, which is incredible, and that was part of the outcome of Museum 2.0, was the need for more gallery space, and opening up those walls allows us to have a rotating gallery space and a secondary space called the Flex Gallery. So we've created more space. So even with our 16-week closure in 2020, we had more exhibits over 2019. And we also provided in the summer virtual content as well as take-home kits. So we had heritage at home kits, so you could learn to do needle felting. You could basically come in and loan out a kit and take it for any period of time and return it at your leisure. As well, we had Beat the Heat. So the Recreation Department ran 14 sessions of Beat the Heat out in Woodland Gardens Park. Very successful. And it was a wonderful, wonderful event. Programs have resumed as of September. So before COVID, we were hosting 5 weekly repeating programs each week. Now we have 3 mornings where we have programs on site. We have our knitters who have returned, our watercolor group, the shipbuilders are on site with us, and we're looking to restart our programming with Artful Opportunities through South Shore Autism in the new year. So that's very good. Lastly, I would say, again, with the Woodland Gardens, we've hosted on Thursdays for the month of November outdoor workshops that look at the local flora and fauna, and that was through the NSCC Environmental Studies program. So a lot of what we do with programs and events are all done with the support of community partners. With the summer and us reopening during COVID, it created a moment for community resilience in our space. Free masks were deployed through the museum. We modeled ways to integrate to the new norm, and we provided a space to have a dialogue about the personal impacts during this period and individual experiences. We aim to capture history as it happens, and so our current initiative right now is called Community Stories, where we're capturing the audio and video of our community members as a way to be able to capture history in real time. When it comes to personnel, as you know, we've just hired on 2 new people. They are replacing our curator, Linda Bedford, who retired May 1st after serving for almost 30 years with the museum. She had a full-time position, and that was split into 2 part-time roles of a museum administrator and museum developer, evenly dividing the hours of this full-time position. These 3 positions, the director, the museum administrator, and the museum developer, more accurately reflect the 3 full-time roles that were originally in place in 2016 and really support our diverse needs as a site. So also our site, as you heard through some of our programs as well as touching of artifacts this last summer season, is that volunteers play a very indispensable role. We are very, very fortunate to have some volunteers who spend a lot of time with us supporting after-hour events, spearheading projects, and enabling staff functionality. Our volunteer hours at the museum equate to a 20-hour part-time per week position. So many of our volunteers are part of our mature demographic. They are fully retired or maybe semi-retired. And what we're finding right now is that as they want to relinquish their roles with our organization and take more time for themselves, there isn't necessarily a renewal of individuals coming into that. So while the Des Bourget Museum has thrived under Museum 2.0, we see that there is continued growth for what we can do in our community. We are moving with the support of the Museum Commission, going forward thinking about taking our 2 part-time positions of museum administrator and museum developer and making them become full-time positions in the 2021-2022 fiscal year. One of the reasons for that is that they have proven themselves to be very capable, and as pointed out, when you find good people, you want to retain them. They support initiatives that are driven by the museum for the benefit of Bridgewater. And although we can currently tread water with the staffing that we have, as our volunteer community ages without renewal, our programs and services will be at risk. So if it is Council's desire to continue to expand the museum's role and what we can do to lift up individuals, businesses, and other organizations, then more staffing resources are needed. So with that in mind, as part of the 2021-22 budget planning, Town Council will be asked to consider an additional operational funding increase of $40,581, which would bring the town's commitment from $75,000, our current level, to $122,581, representing about 0.5% of the town's operating budget. This would return the museum to where it was in terms of the full-time staff complement prior to 2016, but a significantly lower budget impact, a $35,000 savings because of organizational efficiencies brought about as a result of the transition to the Museum 2.0 model. So this would be an investment in the continued growth and sustainability of our programs that serve many residents in Bridgewater, and supports Council's vision to position our town as a great place to live, work, play, and grow. So providing this community-based care alleviates a burden that would otherwise fall to other town and community services, and your contribution to the museum is an investment in the health and well-being of our community as a whole. So that's just something for you to think about, and if you have any questions about what we're doing, I welcome those, but right now we're actually going to take a moment and we're going to watch a small film here. This was put together by Kara Highfield, who was experiencing technical difficulties earlier tonight. But as you can see here, she has brought together some community stories to share with you about our site and the people that use it.
I have a long history of living history. When I moved to Bridgewater, I sought out places of historical interest, and I ended up at Des Bourget. And when I came here, everyone was so friendly and accommodating that I thought, this is a place to live. This is something that would interest me. It has history. Especially since my interest is 18th century history of Canada, and the attraction was strong enough for me to say, I think I'll stay. Well, it didn't take long before "Oh, Bill is your name. Oh, how do you like to become a member of the Friends of the Desbrizet Museum?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, great." And then I was asked, "Oh, would you like to do a little painting rooms?" "Yeah, I could do that." I was helping handyman work. I was assisting people coming into the museum, asking questions once I got to know this place a little better, and the local history of Bridgewater. And it just grew from there until I became a member of the Town of Bridgewater Museum Commission. And I've just gone from there, and I'm spending probably a couple of days of the week here, and I've been here 3 years now.
Our group is called Clickety Clack Knitters. We started it about 3 or 4 years ago, and I went to the town and approached them about a class for knitting, and they didn't have anything, and I said I would certainly be willing to start it. We have an average of 8 to 10 ladies who come regularly, and others that come when they can. There's no prerequisite other than if you don't know how, we'll teach you, and if you know how, it's just to come and sit and chat and enjoy time with other people, like-minded people. When you're working on projects, it's good to have someone else around to give you some hints and tips. And it's more camaraderie. It's more of a chance for the ladies to get together and meet. A lot of people, once they get into their senior years, live alone. And a couple of the ladies that come out, this is the only time they get to come out and talk with other women. Yeah, I've only been here for a couple of years, and when I approached the town, I was looking for something to do, a way to meet people, and it certainly helped me. So I think these kinds of groups are really good for that, especially as people age. It gets them out of the house, it gets them a purpose. We all need a purpose in our life, and I think just going twice a week, you're not overcommitted, but you're able to just get out and see a friendly face, which is important at this time, anytime really. And we really have a lot of fun. Sometimes we get a little loud and rowdy in there, but that's the best we can do.
We're very fortunate as a photo club to be able to have a permanent exhibit space. We rotate between members. The shows are for 2 months at a stretch. And today we're just hanging up a show by Gary Smith.
I remember back when we first started displaying at the Desbrizet, we've had special exhibits. For instance, our 30-year exhibit, our 25-year exhibit. And off and on, we would have exhibits on the wall. But with the new wall, we're very fortunate that the Desbrizet has dedicated both walls to the photo club. And we have people lined up to exhibit. Their pieces are up for 2 months and they rotate. And every once in a while we'll have a mixed exhibit from the club. And it's actually, it's very, very good for the club and for the members, because there's very few areas in Bridgewater with a space such as this where we can display our images.
And it's also an opportunity to do the traditional paper printed images as opposed to just showing our images in a digital format.
That's everything. Thank you, guys. Thank you for, thank you for giving me the time to report to you on our museum over 2020 and hearing a little bit from the people who use the space and how it's just, you know, an enriched community space where lots of people come together for a shared experience.
Well, thank you. You can't really argue with the success of Museum 2.0 when you look at the number of visitors and just the spike and actually sustaining that. It's clearly worked. So, and hats off to you and your team and your team of volunteers for that. Are there any questions Lynette? Yes.
Maybe not a question for Lynette, because I think we sort of touched on it when I went for a visit, but when was the last time we engaged Communities, Culture, and Heritage about the funding agreement and the fact that it hasn't changed for years and so on? I mean, we've done our part. Lynette's done her part to rejuvenate this facility. It wouldn't be a shame if it ever had to close because of lack of funding from the province. I mean, it'd be a shame for Bridgewater, the area, and the province as a whole. So, you know, is it time to engage?
So I'm going to speak to that
Minister?
briefly.
Yeah.
So we positioned ourselves very, very well. If you'll remember, in 2016, all the museums are evaluated as part of their operating, and in 2016, all museums in the province were evaluated. Our score was the highest. We just got reevaluated in 2019, and we improved upon that score by an extra 2%, scoring 93%, which was exceptional. We received museum accreditation. Only 4 museums to date have received a museum accreditation. There were talks with Community, Culture, and Heritage just preceding COVID about that funding structure and how it did need to improve. And so those museums who were participating in it, you know, there would be sort of a different tiered structure, and part of it would be based on your evaluation score. Also, they are very, very much committed now to what you were doing for your community, how you were serving a much broader audience and bringing people through. The unfortunate truth is that the pandemic hit, and any of those sort of conversations have stalled at this time, simply because maybe, you know, there just isn't the capacity to have them right now as they're deploying funds through other streams. Yeah. So the long answer is we had a conversation.
Yeah.
And we were very optimistic, or I was very optimistic about our standing, but yeah, it does need to be addressed, and they understand that.
Councillor Thorburn.
You know, we also talked about the cost of the wall, carrying wall,
Yeah.
from the province, and getting that increased because it's been about 10 years. It's at the same level.
More, yeah.
So we've had those conversations with the province.
The province has a habit of selling us on a great deal, and then nothing ever increases, even CPI increases or anything to that effect. And we have that around the town in different areas, and I think it's just the minister's a local friend, and yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably worth me giving you a little poke to see if those conversations can restart, and then of course if council can do anything to support those conversations or move them along. I think the deputy mayor summed it up perfectly. You've done your job, we've done our job. There's one more partner in this that we need to change that funding agreement that's been kind of stuck. So
Stagnant.
Yeah, so let us know what we can do.
Okay.
And are there any other questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is AT plan approval and implementation plan. Lots of plans. And I see we have Ms. Childs to run us through that.
Thank you. Just getting a presentation up. Perfect. Yeah. So as you said, I'm presenting a summary of the Active Transportation Plan, or AT Plan, as well as the implementation plan for that plan. So staff applied, I should say, some of you have heard some of this presentation already, but so I am still doing a summary of the AT plan for our new council members and for a refresh. So staff applied for funding from the province in October 2018 to renew the Active Transportation Plan. In January, February of 2019, the Community Development Department and Engineering drafted an RFP for a consultant, and in April 2019, the consultant began their work. We received the first draft of the plan in September of 2019, and just this past June, staff brought the AT plan to council for a discussion session to provide an overview, and council requested an implementation plan prior to approval. And the AT plan was a strategic priority of council in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So we needed to review our existing AT plan because the original one was from 2008. Most of the policy pieces of that plan had been completed, but what was left is larger infrastructure projects that are no longer relevant. And importantly, best practice for active transportation has changed a lot since 2008, including updated work from the Transportation Association of Canada, or TAC, in 2017. And the old plan no longer provided relevant guidance. So this AT plan isn't to replace technical guidance such as the TAC guidelines. Fully designing for specific streets wasn't in the scope of the AT plan, but the plan is to establish a vision, goals, strategies, and actions for improving AT policies, standards, infrastructure, and programs, and it aims to improve the accessibility, comfort, convenience, and safety of people using AT. So there's a lot of connections with the AT plan within other internal and external projects and initiatives. So the movement towards REC 2.0 will be in line, as well as provincial recreation mandates, because although REC and AT are similar things, there's a new recreation focus on unstructured play with the province, which is pretty broad, but it looks at supporting AT in different ways, including things like street calming measures, traffic speed, and universal design for trail construction. There's other branding, trail branding and partnership opportunities that have come up since the AT plan was renewed, including the Great Trail of Canada and the Blue Route, both of which are looking at designating part of the Centennial Trail as part of their route. The mobility improvement system, which is part of Energized Bridgewater, is also related in that the main objective is to improve accessibility and affordability of transportation in neighborhoods where people are at risk of energy poverty. And transit is part of the MIS, the Mobility Improvement System, and in general goes hand in hand with AT. So for the AT plan, there were some gaps from what was originally expected, but there are definitely some merits. So it's a guide to help design better when the time comes to do projects like street projects. It isn't overly detailed for specific projects, rather it's an overarching plan for the whole town. So it includes a minimum grid network map, which allows us to see where various types of AT infrastructure should be prioritized to create a network that connects residents and destinations. It includes action items to complete, identifies some current issues, identifies priority areas for improvements, has a quick build guide with a bit of information on temporary AT infrastructure, has cut sheets that provide recommended treatments for parts of the proposed network, and overall is a town-wide plan that aims to make AT considered more in all projects. Some parts of the plan are specific and others are general, and the town wouldn't be committing to exactly what designs are laid out in the plan. The design phase of a project is when it would be determined what is possible and what is going to be prioritized. So the vision of the AT plan is that walking, wheeling, and cycling are safe, convenient, and enjoyable ways to move around Bridgewater for users of all ages and abilities and are a common part of everyday life. And the goals of the plan are to improve safety for people using active transportation modes, create more connections and places for walking, wheeling, and cycling, continue to build a culture of active transportation, prioritize active transportation in the town's capital and operations budget, and utilize active transportation to enhance quality of life as well as the quality of the natural environment. So this is one of the pages from the plan. It's the proposed active transportation network plan. And this plan was based on a few criteria, including upcoming capital projects that staff requested they provide some recommendations on, direct travel routes around town, and connecting people with destinations. So there's different colors on there, and they represent different proposed treatments like bicycle lanes or multi-use paths. And the treatment is based on things like driving speed, the type of road, and traffic volumes that exist. And it's not possible to fully achieve an AT network without completing some of the other action items from the plan. The intent of this network plan is to show some priority routes, but it's important to note that it doesn't omit other streets from AT improvements. So this is the proposed network prioritization map, and it gives an idea of what parts of the network map should be prioritized first. This took into account capital projects that were scheduled at the time, and those can change, but it also looked at connecting to existing destinations and other factors. So this is an example of a cut sheet. There are a few of those for each of the proposed streets of the network plan. It shows where on the network plan is being referenced in that top corner, so you can see this is for High Street. The proposed AT infrastructure for this one is a multi-use path and includes minimum design details that should be taken into account.
And these are recommended infrastructure. So the consultants didn't measure the existing right-of-way because that wasn't in the scope of this plan. So when work is being completed, staff would have to work within the constraints of each of the areas, but this and the best practice design guidelines and some of the action items that staff would be looking to complete can help us design for a positive AT experience across town. So I've mentioned action items a few times. There's a number of them, and they fall into 3 categories. So the first is expand and enhance the active transportation network. And that involves things like updating our design and construction standards, prioritizing certain intersections for updates, and adopting trail guidelines. The second is adopt policy to support active transportation. That involves things like updating parts of the land use bylaw, making a plan for pedestrian wayfinding, and reviewing current maintenance requirements for AT infrastructure. And the third is encourage walking, rolling, and cycling for people of all ages and abilities. And that focuses on working with different partners. One last thing about the action items is there's an overarching statement saying that the town will consider active transportation facilities in the design and implementation of all infrastructure projects, so not just those that are on that network plan. And that would require different internal departments and external partners to work collaboratively and share information on appropriate opportunities. So the first 2 action items are key in moving AT forward in town, and those are to revise the design and construction standards and create design criteria for existing streets. So the design and construction standards already exist, and they're for constructing new roads. The focus would just be reviewing one part of it, the street one specifically, while the design criteria would be a new document for retrofitting existing streets to make sure they're in line with national best practice, including the ones that are listed here. The 2017 TAC Geometric Design Guide focuses more on pedestrian and bicycle integrated design than their previous versions did, and considers human factors as well. Focuses on geometric design, while something like the bottom one there, the NACDO Urban Streets Guide, includes things like toolboxes and tactics to make streets safer and more livable. So it's important to note that doing these 2 action items would potentially increase costs to the town and developers in the form of improved infrastructure, but this would be looked at when these 2 are being reviewed. And they're also key action items, like I said, to move AT forward, because it really just kind of sets a baseline. There's a large number of factors that can affect the user's experience as they move, things like signal timing to the number of trees and their placement to how a sidewalk intersects with a driveway. So having a design criteria can help staff think about a variety of factors when doing various roadwork projects. The plan also includes a best practice design guide as one of its appendices. It takes examples from TAC and elsewhere and includes a list of resources that are good references. It's not exactly what we were looking for the design guide. We were hoping for more detail and more focused on low cost and high impact changes, but it's a start, and that second action item, the design criteria creation, would help expand on this. So as I mentioned, an implementation plan was requested by Council. The AT plan itself is a 10-year plan with a 5-year review. With the report that Council received, there was also a Gantt chart of the proposed implementation plan. And the actions listed in the first column of that sheet are those taken directly from the AT plan. And there's more context about each of them in the plan itself, so that should be referenced in conjunction with that. Some of the items shown on the chart will only occur once, some are proposed to occur annually, some to coincide with budget planning, and some to span over longer periods of time. So there's a variety in how those would be implemented and achieved. The timeline that you received is also color-coded to show what actions would involve the Community Development Department, the Engineering Department, and the AT Committee. And there's also some sub-actions for each action, although those are not comprehensive. They just give an idea of what those first steps would be. And it's also important to note that the timeline is an approximation. It's important to focus more on the prioritization of actions rather than the exact dates themselves. And this chart will become a working document for staff to update. So I won't go over the whole chart, but I'll mention the actions that are proposed for 2020 and 2021. So the first 2 action items I've already discussed.
And these are an example of kind of focusing on that priority rather than an exact timeline. I was speaking with people in the engineering department and about that timeline, and although they're critical to complete soon, they won't necessarily exactly line up with what is proposed in there, but they are prioritized. We were originally waiting to hear back on funding to move forward with those, so it got a bit postponed. But some other items for 2020 are to prioritize installation of sidewalks and crossings on bus routes and ensure transit infrastructure is suitable for all ages and abilities. This is included for 2020 because part of it's already being worked on by staff. This item came to council in August, and staff is working on a bus stop improvement plan, so that's where that comes into play. And for 2021, although I'm including kind of the full action items here, most of these are long-term projects, but aspects of them could begin next year. So some of the actions are continuation of the 2020 ones. Prioritize intersections, pedestrian crossings, and sidewalks is also partially included, as this is part of ongoing work for the mobility improvement system within the Energized Bridgewater work. Provide high-quality bicycle parking and facilities at town facilities is included because there are already bicycle racks to be installed, so staff and the committee can work on finding locations where those could go. Develop a plan to implement pedestrian wayfinding is included as well because there are existing standards already, and it's already been worked on over the last few years, so this will just, we'll keep going. It will continue the conversations and that work. Review and update maintenance requirements for AT infrastructure is included because although this is a large multi-department conversation and requires an understanding of service level expectations, the conversation has started specifically for trails, so it's just good to keep that conversation going. So that's one aspect of that action. Develop a construction mitigation policy for detours is included because although that is, again, a big conversation, there's lots of development around town in the last few years and there's still development interest, so it's important to start having those conversations. Finally, AT marketing initiatives and programming are all included because that's work that the AT committee is doing and can do further and can be done continuously with some of the other action items. So since Council has received the AT plan and an implementation plan has been created with certain actions prioritized, it's recommended that Council approve the 2020 Active Transportation Plan and associated implementation plan.
Fantastic. Questions from members of Council? There's a lot in there. Councilor Thorburn.
I seen one slide in there where you was planning on doing some active transportation work up on High Street. And I know with our capital budget, there's a section of that we was looking in the next few years from Empire to Victoria Road.
Yeah.
So would that plan kind of work with your active transportation plan? And has engineering update the figures? Because it's going to cost more if we're going to implement some of the changes required by active transportation.
Yeah, so I won't speak to exactly what the plans are, but I know there has been some designs done for that, and it does line up with what is in the active transportation plan. So that is kind of relevant. It reflects it. So those, I don't know if those costs have already been determined, but that design has already kind of been done. So
thank you.
Questions? I think that maybe you can actually speak to this. It's kind of a question but a statement at the same time. I think that the public perception of active transportation has changed, and they're seeing it as a more and more important. Where maybe 10 years ago, or I think back to when we put the bicycle lanes on Glen Allen, and there was confusion and you know, why are we doing that? I think now people are realizing, and perhaps even during the pandemic when everyone was just, you know, I need to get outside. And Bridgewater was blessed to be one of the few communities that could keep our trails open and had sidewalks. And the problem we actually had was when the province said, when the Premier said, stay the blazes home and don't leave your community, we had parking problems with people coming from outside Bridgewater to inside Bridgewater just so they could use our sidewalks and our trails. And so I'm wondering, if that's the feedback that you're getting, is that there's a growing acceptance that the road itself is not necessarily to be prioritized above the trail. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting we don't pave roads or anything like that, but that they have to be considered more equal because more and more people are relying on those trails, sidewalks, bicycle lanes?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a variety of, well, a lot of best practice supports that, that supportive AT infrastructure. And I think you kind of touched on it and what I was saying with the connections that exist. Like, you were talking about recreation, which is also related to active transportation, and I think even though active transportation is a funny term, people aren't necessarily going to always use that, but it's like walking around a park, it's walking to the store. So I think people are doing that more, and they might be doing things more in a recreation base too, which will potentially lead to doing it for other reasons, walking to work or something. And there's so many people that already use active transportation. You see it all around town all the time, people walking, people biking, people scootering. So I think there's a general, I didn't mean you, but that worked. I think there's just more visibility of it too, so I think there's probably more of a understanding from the general population its importance.
Any questions or comments from council?
Mackenzie, the plan doesn't include anything at exit 12A, and obviously that will grow as we grow and so on, and that design comes through. But have you looked at what's on the other side of exit 12A on both of those sections, and what we can connect to on that side of the river, so to speak?
Yeah,
okay.
Like in the business park?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that came up in internal staff discussions because there wasn't anything in the very specific, which roads to look at or the network plan focused over there, because the announcement of the exit came after a lot of this work had already been done. But I think that's something that's really important to note is although that's not on the network plan, it doesn't mean it's not important. And so this plan can provide rationale for any street work or street development, but that's where those first two action items come into play as well. Just thinking of AT as a whole, even if it's not already, there's no set plan of what actually is going to be implemented and what treatments are going to be there. Okay.
Can I ask you one? And is there a rule of thumb or a benchmark that says, especially when you show that that diagram of the cars and then the trails on either side that says, hey, normally a road would cost X. When you add these pieces, it's X times 0.4% or 40%, or is there anything?
I don't know exactly in that format. Okay. I know there was very kind of preliminary costing work done for certain treatment options in the AT plan. So it talks about how much bollards are, how much painting a line is, how much different things like that are. But that's kind of I don't have that handy. Okay. I think it exists. There's lots of information out there about how much things cost, and with staff working on projects, that would kind of come about each time. Might vary. There's set costs of how much things are, but depending on the project, depending on the street, things will change a bit.
Other questions or comments? What is the wish of council? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Fougere.
Yes, Your Worship, I'll make a motion. That Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the Active Transportation Plan, Appendix A, and the proposed implementation plan, Appendix B, as contained in document 20-12A.
Seconder. Councilor Caldwell, further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Keep thinking back to a conference I was at, and they kept referring to all the pieces of road, trail, sidewalk as public luxury in a way that you shouldn't make assumptions that everything is just, it has to be road and then maybe something else, you might get a sidewalk or you might get the bike lane. That it was all, nothing should be a given. It was all public luxury, and taking nothing for granted meant that everyone had to argue for, you had to argue for the road as much as you had to argue for the sidewalk and for the bike lanes. And when they started doing that, people started to come to the table saying, well, we have to start with making sure we can get people moving, right? So we talk about when the winter comes, what's the first thing that people want done? It's actually the sidewalks to make sure the kids can walk to school. Then it's the roads. 10 years ago, it might have been make sure the roads, right? So I think there's that shift in mindset. It's that it's kind of an interesting time for active transportation. I think exciting. Our next item is grants to organizations. the November 1st, 2020 intake period, and there's one item there for consideration. Is someone prepared to make a motion, and then we can discuss that?
Make a
Councilor
motion?
Bashir, yes, please.
That council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the Grants to Organization Committee and award grants for the November 1st intake period as follows. $450 to Lunenburg County Juno Club.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councilor Thorburn, any discussion?
Question.
Question is being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Next item is the Great Trail of Canada. Lots of trail talk today. I'm looking at I see our director coming down. Aren't we all looking forward to the time we don't have to, okay, it's my turn, I gotta put on the mask, come down, take off the mask.
Mask, glasses, everything.
Glasses, yeah.
Yes. So the Great Trail of Canada is a new name for the Trans-Canada Trail. It was rebranded, and I'm not entirely sure when. The local committee in Nova Scotia approached the municipalities on the South Shore, actually in the western part of the province, over a year ago around interest. And then last month we received a request to consider registering as part of this trail network. And so there's other municipal units that have also been approached for this. And so the Great Trail will stretch over 27,000 kilometers across Canada. So approximately 8 kilometers of Centennial Trail has been, I guess, from the Great Trail of Canada group, they've approved this 8-kilometer section and are asking if the town wishes to register it as part of the trail network. So, and specifically part of the western loop of the Great Trail in Nova Scotia. So Nova Scotia overall is in the process of creating a province-wide network of trails as part of the Great Trail. And so the trail, they hope to connect from one end of the province to the other, and then that connects us all the way to the west coast in BC. That's the ultimate vision of the Great Trail. So the request is if we would join this. It really is a branding piece. It doesn't change anything about the functionality of our trail. It doesn't require any change to how we operate and maintain our trails now. It doesn't require any additional insurance. We spoke to our insurer, and our own insurance covers everything that they would require. What it does offer up is a branding people look for when they go and visit. You know, when hopefully in the age post-COVID, when people travel province to province, people often look to, you know, wanting to hike parts of the Trans-Canada Trail in each province or things like that. So it's a bit of a national brand that we would end up being a part of. There's also potential access to funding from a new source of funding that we wouldn't have access to otherwise, and they fund some of the things that we may struggle as a town to get access to because we don't have access to some of the other community managed trail funds that are available in the province. So for specialized, like, you know, the bridge assessment and things like that, we may be able to apply for funding from the overall fund associated with the Trans-Canada Trail. And we would be able to take advantage of marketing and tourism opportunities of promoting what our trail is, our section of the western loop of the Great Trail of Canada. So that's really what it is. There might be fundraising opportunities and other things as well that we would get if we became part of the registered and recognized Great Trail of Canada. So that's really what what the request is to consider. And yeah, we don't think that it would harm what we do, but only add to what we offer.
Any questions to our director? It's pretty straightforward. Someone's prepared to make a motion? Yes, sorry.
The agreement's pretty basic and just requires that you meet some of the kind of regulations and standards. If the quality of the trail decreased, would that status be taken away, and would it have any negative impact at that point?
That is a very good question that we have not asked that specific question, but we could do that. I'm not sure what it would be to deregister once we become part of it, but we can look into that. And if there is any sort of penalty and or negative impact, we could come back.
Questions? I kind of liked it when it was called the Trans-Canada Trail.
Me too.
Just think about Michael Graves sending us a postcard from the West Coast saying he made it on his new bike.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, you can see that too. 61 kilometers at a time. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Frazier?
Yes. The Council for the Town of Bridgewater directs staff to proceed with the registration agreement to become part of the Great Trail of Canada.
Do I have a seconder? Councilor Caldwell, further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program November 2020 report is there for your information. And it must sound like a broken record, but I don't know where we would be without this program. I would encourage the public to read this, get involved. Reading how they've helped seniors through COVID is just, it's amazing. So thank you to all those involved, because that's a lot of people being helped in our county. So that's there for you. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Chris. 2020 tax sale process deferral. So I see our Director of Finance is going to come down.
Hello.
Hello.
So everything I have to talk to you about tonight I feel like is COVID related. However, so when we look at the tax sale issue, we would have had a tax sale this past spring. So in March, when we were just getting ready to post a tax sale notice on a property, the province basically shut down and we were all working from home, so that didn't happen. And while we've been waiting for things to calm down and hopefully do this soon, we've now been hit by, we're in the second wave with additional provincial restrictions now. So, so basically the finance department's in charge of the tax sale process. So at this point, we actually have 2 properties that would be eligible for tax sale now. And then anybody that is eligible for tax sale coming into the next fiscal year, we would also be having a tax sale in the spring of 2021. So what we're asking is, at this point, due to uncertainty, to take these 2 properties and carry them forward to the 2021 tax sale and include them in that. At this point, we don't, there are properties that are given preliminary notice, but we can't tell you how many additional properties there might be on the 2021 tax sale list, because people can make arrangements, pay their bill, and so on. So they'll come off of the preliminary list. So at this point, we're asking for that to be deferred so that we can go through, hopefully, a normal tax sale process in the spring. We don't know what that'll look like yet, but we are seeing some of the municipal units going with the tendering process, as opposed to having a live in the building, people coming in from outside. So we will come back probably with a recommendation on how we might hold the tax sale process, maybe after the new year when we see how things restart and, or if things get more challenging after January. But at this point, we just, the MGA permits us to defer the tax sale process on properties for up to 2 years. So we don't have an unlimited time frame on these 2 properties. We have to initiate the process. But this would just buy us some time given all the uncertainty at this point.
Makes sense. Any questions? Seems quite straightforward. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Thorburn?
I would move that Council of the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and defer the tax sale for the 2 properties identified for the tax sale in 2020 until the regular tax sale proceedings in 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor McDonald. Further discussion?
Question.
Question be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. I see we sorted this out so you don't have to keep going back and forth and back and forth. See, we've wised up a little bit. So our next item is 2020-2021 second quarter financial report.
Okay, so again, we're going to talk about COVID a lot. So where we stand right now with our town operating budget is that we're actually projecting a budget surplus of almost $290,000. But a lot of the explanation is we didn't incur some expenses, or expenses might be deferred. And there were the items that we have brought separately to council to be approved as budget adjustments. Those aren't reflected in the budget column that you see here. It will be in the third quarter report. But for the most part, staff are just already accommodating for it in their forecast, but it's not an actual adjustment in the budget column here. So just a couple of things. Since the last quarterly report, we did actually separate out the deed transfer tax that was included with tax revenue. So it's a little bit easier for you to see. So we're projecting that tax revenue is likely to be under budget around $30,000. Most of that is the result of appeals and adjustments. There have been several of them come through lately. The deed transfer tax, we're actually about $100,000 ahead of budget to where we think we should be. And I know we had originally thought deed transfer tax might be down because of what happened in April, March and April. Was we were seeing numbers that were half or less than what we normally have in a month, and then things spiked with all the property transactions. But now that we're in the second wave, we're kind of back to the uncertainties. So we are forecasting that to be on budget, because if we, over the next couple of months, return to those March and April numbers, it's going to bump us right back to, you know, that total budget of $450,000, even though we're ahead for this point in the year. We've seen pretty sporadic, so tax certificates give us some sense of what's going on for transactions, and we did have a couple of slow weeks. So, you know, it's definitely still one of those uncertain things. Real estate agents are saying the inventory's low and so on, so we just don't want to think we're going to have that money and it not come in. So we are projecting that to be on budget, but there's a chance that we could be over by the end of the year. On other revenue sources, for the most part, sales of service, other revenue from owned sources, and conditional transfers are really a result of COVID. So whether it's transit fees, recreation, and so on, we've really had some decreases in those revenue sources. Fortunately, we have offsetting reductions in the expenses on those. On the other revenue from owned sources, our development fees are actually over budget by $24,000, so that's a good variance, as well as interest on overdue taxes is over budget by $90,000. It's not necessarily good that we have taxes owing, but we're collecting interest at 1% per month on that, so that's over budget. On the expenditure side, under general government services, a lot, again, are related to COVID. Under the administration, we had budgeted for some new staff, and so because those were hired later in the year than anticipated, those are showing a bit under budget, so we have some savings there. Some of our variances are also timing. The Municipal Joint Services Board had some pretty significant staff turnover and new hires, so they were a little bit behind on some billing. So while we look like we're under budget, we're not actually. That'll forecast out to the end of the year to be okay. Under protective services, a few things going on there. We had some negative variances on insurance and wages. And then so on the other side of things, lockup and detention and courts costs are decreased. Some of it related to COVID. And under fire protection and other protective services, we had some savings on salaries for the fire inspector that were included in the budget and not incurred, as well as training costs and other purchases of equipment that didn't happen. Under transportation, again, a lot of our budget variances are related to COVID, whether it's wages, because we actually had staff working on rotation. It might have been the result of not having the bus work, you know, in transit, so we saved some wages there and things like that. So a lot of those costs were a result of COVID. Environmental health, again, savings on wages and other things related to COVID, like maintenance. Recreation, we've talked about that one at length regarding the pool closures, so we've had some really significant cost savings there, but at the same time we've had offsetting reductions in revenue there as well. So that's the the gist of where we're at. We've had a lot of savings, or, it could even be, some safety training and things like that that get deferred to another year. So we might see that some of it's a temporary savings.
Questions from council on that? Councilor Thorburn.
Just two, and the first one is I'd like to see the deed transfer tax in there. I think we asked for that to be in it, and now it stands out, and we know where we're at, which is awesome. And certainly the surplus, where other municipalities seem to be in a negative balance, we have a surplus, which I think is awesome as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I know staff have worked very hard during a very challenging time to kind of keep us on track. And Councillor Thorburn, you're right. There are other communities that are struggling, and we hope that as the recovery begins, that they themselves get back on track when they get to their third quarter and fourth quarter. It's going to be a tough end to the fiscal 2020-2021 year. Other questions to our Director of Finance? If you have any, then you know who to ask. Great, thank you. That was almost too easy.
Andrew looked like he was thinking hard over there.
Still
like
thinking hard, but I'll figure it out and send you a note if you need to. Thank you, though.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Going once. State Safe Restart Funding agreement. Safe Restart Agreement funding. I know we've got a couple of items in there. Did you want to just quickly go over those things?
So we received a total of $639,553 in funding through the Safe Restart Funding Agreement. $44,480 of that is directed towards transit. So it's not the total $639 that can be spent on general operations. We had to allocate $44,000 to transit. The specific details of the funding are still to be provided. However, when they did provide the letter advising that the money was going to be received, they did indicate that the funding would be used to, or the intent of the funding is to address increased operating costs resulting from a reduction in revenue due to COVID-19, to implement social distancing and infection prevention and control protocols required to operate facilities, public spaces, and effectively deliver services to citizens, acquire additional personal protective equipment, and support safe transit operations and innovative solutions required to adjust to modified capacity. So if it met those criteria, we're told that it would be eligible for funding. The funding is for the fiscal year 2020-21. I do note ending ends March 31st, 2021, but I do have a question into them about being able to carry that over, because it's late in the year that they give you the funding, and some of the measures we haven't implemented because of the concern over impact on our budget. So this funding enables us to implement some of the measures that we have proposed, but we weren't prepared to do that until we had funding to offset that. So the strategic management team has met to discuss what issues, what pressures we're feeling, what measures we feel we need to implement in order to continue to provide the work environment necessary for staff to deliver services to the public, and for us to provide those services to the public. And that, as I say, includes building modifications, PPE, technology to enable us to work remotely when required, those types of things. So we have a list that we've prepared for council, and that list is what we've identified are things that can help us be more robust, shall we say, in terms of our ability to respond to COVID-19 and provide that work environment. So you'll see that there's laptops. We had all-in-ones. Some didn't have those, and we had to borrow temporarily from the Joint Services Board, and those were actually, some of those were what you're using right now. So they got those in early, and when we had to close in March, that's what we were provided with, were the laptops that were bought for councilors. So we do have to kind of scale up a bit in the laptop department enable us to work remotely when required to do that. Scanners as well, so that when we're handling paper or scanning things, they can do that remotely as well. There's a lot of our process that still involve a lot of paper that we're trying to reduce, but nonetheless, during when we were closed last time, we had the Director of Finance scanning invoices and timesheets and all those things because we weren't electronic in some of those. We're looking at some building modifications, so separation, plexiglass, glass, doors to help close off some spaces. So rather than we're finding that the move towards the open office space is somewhat limited us a bit. So we're looking at how we can provide those physical barriers for staff. We have some in our water and wastewater, very small work environments, difficult to work with 6 feet apart. So we're looking at how to provide that. So building some office space within those buildings to provide that separation. The arena, we're proposing that we would have a satellite office there so that when we do have people that work close together, we can move someone there and they can work out of that office space. So they can provide that. It is also part of the overall long-range plan for the arena too, to have office space for parks and transit there. Phone system, big one. So that is to make the phone system more robust so that when we do go remote, our UC client works, we have a sufficient number of seats so that staff can answer their phones on their laptops from their home. We had some issues with our other phone system. So when I first reported to council, that was 30,000. We've actually got some funding of 9,000, so we reduced that down to 21 that would have to be funded through this. We have some additional cleaning and janitorial that's required to maintain and meet the COVID cleaning protocols. Time and attendance software, that's 25,000, and that's to automate that process, make it electronic, so that we're not doing paper timesheets, and that we're able to submit using a software program in the internet, web-based program, our time, and it tracks our attendance, sick time, vacation, all that. So we're looking at that. That's a little bit of a longer-term plan, but we can start the implementation of that. 4th floor, just some renovations there because we have some shared space with Patrick and Allison. Council chambers, some improvements to our audio and our network and video here so that, as you see, we have Teams and virtual attendance, so it's to improve that, and also the audience's viewing of our meetings on Facebook and YouTube. In the committee room, we'd be looking at doing some upgrades there as well to enable video and audio there so that that could be a meeting where you have virtual meetings as well. Automatic door openers, a big one. So we can get into the town by pushing those buttons, but we don't have a lot on the internal. And so that's to reduce the touch points, touched surfaces as you hit that instead of opening up the doorknob. You can hit it with your elbow or your hip or your foot.
See people drop door openers as we walk around town hall.
Recreation registration software. That's to enable online registration, so people don't have to come in. We talked about that last week, but we proposed that that would be a good response to COVID-19 and enabling the public to be serviced remotely from coming in. We're anticipating that with COVID-19, there will be the access to indoor recreation facilities are going to be probably like they are now, somewhat limited, and people will be asked to find ways to get their recreation outdoors. And because of that, we're anticipating that there will be an increased expectation for trail maintenance in the winter, as well as sidewalks. And so we're proposing that's a little over $50,000 that we have proposed there. That would be increased operating costs, and to get the appropriate equipment that would enable us to maintain the trails to a certain level and the sidewalks to an increased level during the winter. The museum has some space restrictions, and they also are looking to be set up with some laptops so they can work remotely as well when needed. And then website improvements for virtual access to archives, so people don't have to come in to the facility to view them. And then UNSM and AMA have advised that they will be taking a portion of that funding, a small amount, from every municipality, and basically asked that we pay that because their way that they generate revenue so that they can represent municipalities across Nova Scotia is through conferences and those types of things, and those revenue generating opportunities have been removed from them. Project management for IT enterprise solutions. So this is essentially, we know that if we do time and attendance, we're doing online recreation, we're doing a phone system, we're doing upgrades to our audio and video, that the IT support may be limited in terms of what we can get in terms of human hours to work on this. So we're proposing that we would budget so that we could ensure it got done, given all the other demands that all the other partners may have. And then police services have also identified that they could be equipped a little better for remote work as well. So those total $304,748. We've had occupational health and safety. We've had an increase in PPE. That's $10,000 that we forecasted there. So that's like your hand sanitizer, wipes, masks, those types of things. Public works salary is in there as well. So we coded this. This isn't an actual increase in salary, as Kim's reported before. It's when we had the rotational shifts. So we had, because they're critical workers, we didn't want them all working together. So we separated them, and some would be at home and some would be at work. And so the at-home time was coded to COVID-19 because it's not actual operational work time. So that's $84,000. So our total is $398,000. The restart funding amount is $595,000. And then we have the $196,000 remaining. The LCLC, during their last update, Kent advised if things continue to slow down, then we may have to, we will see an increase in our municipal grant. So that's if things don't pick back up in terms of activity at the LCLC. And so we estimate at $70,000 as an additional amount for grant because they've lost revenue there. And so that's $126,000 remaining. And at the JSB, although we haven't been provided with the exact figure, there has been a reduction in commercial waste. And that means that there's been a reduction in revenue that's come in from that waste. And when there's a deficit, they have a little bit of reserve, but we very well may be asked to fund some of that. So that's just kind of hanging out there. Don't know that number yet. So that's and given some of the uncertainty over the next 3 months, it might be good just to have that 126 there in the event that there's further initiatives that we have to undertake. So that is what's being recommended to Council for expenditures under the COVID-19 Safe Restart funding. Because they're not budgeted, we would require the approval of Council to do this.
Before we get a motion on the floor, are there any questions to the CAO? Councilor McDonald?
I know that you don't have specific details on this yet, but maybe through experience, how would it typically work if some of those kind of variables weren't needed, or it didn't snow this winter and we don't need extra sidewalk plowing? Do we have to spend it? Categories or lose it?
I haven't got the details of the funding. Like, it's very vague. I'm going with no. We can move it around a bit and keep it. We just wouldn't spend it, and we may very well carry. My question to them is, can we carry it forward to the next fiscal year as well? Because some of the stuff here, we're constrained by resources, so we can't create this whole list of stuff because we need to be able to actually do it. So I would say stay tuned. I'm hoping I'll hear soon.
Well, unless the province knows for a fact that the pandemic is going to end this fiscal, I would anticipate that we're going to need to carry that money into next year, but maybe they know. Maybe. State of emergency.
Start a conspiracy theory.
Other questions? Councilor Crowell.
Do you have anything else earmarked for the balance of the funding if we didn't? I'm assuming we probably will need it. Something will come up, but anything else that we could use it for?
No, I think our list has been fairly exhaustive. And my comment to the management team was I feel a lot more comfortable knowing that we have that little bit of a buffer there in the event that something comes up that we just don't. It's unexpected. We haven't anticipated. I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to bring it right down to the last dime type thing.
Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Frazier?
Yes, Your Worship. Council for the Town of Bridgewater approved the list of expenditures proposed in Appendix A of Document 20-205 to be funded from the Safe Restart funding received by the town.
Thank you. Seconded by Mayor Tanner. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. 10.11 is the building permit reports for November 2020. We seem to be defying the odds in a year with a pandemic, as we currently are $6.3 million ahead of last year in terms of the value of building permits, and we're on track to meet essentially 2018 numbers, which was a year that was one of our highest, if not our highest in recent memory. So I mean, we've heard that building stock is existing building stock's non-existent, so people are building. We know there's lots of apartments going up, and it seems from the presentation we had at the top of the meeting that it's only going to increase as people look to move to smaller communities like ours. I think people are going to, all that focus on migrating to the city center, I think people are going to want to go back to the smaller towns where things are a little calmer and at least this crisis is a little safer. So that is there. If you have questions, those can be directed to staff, but certainly a good news story that defies the odds, I think. Going down to business arising and unfinished business, we have the tender for the police car that we did not award. So just people are probably wondering, as I did, why is this here? So the motion we had last time did not pass. So now we need to, so we defeated a motion, which means now we have to have a motion to say we're not awarding the tender. So the last motion was just...
it was implied.
The motion, yeah, the motion was to award the tender and it was defeated. Yeah. So now we kind of need
for the official record.
Yeah.
For the vendors.
So, yes, this is not a different police car. This is just kind of putting to bed the other one. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Deputy Mayor Tanner.
Your Worship, I move that the Council for the Town of Bridgewater not award tender 20-08 BPS supply and delivery of one 2020 or newer black police spec vehicle due to being over budget.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Frazier. Further discussion?
Questions?
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I just want to make sure nobody thought, 2 police cars, 2 meetings in a row. No, same police car, 2 motions. 2020-2021 quarterly report engineering department. It's here.
This is normally all together. You already, but when we were doing the orientation, I asked the departments to time it with the orientation, so engineering's was last. And so it was put into the orientation folder under engineering, and it's on the agenda for information. If you have any questions about any of the initiatives that are noted within the quarterly report, Larry's here and can answer them.
Might as well come down anyway, because I think you're going to be up for the next one, right? For Pearl Street next. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
So we can't use any of the Safe Restart funding for the BMA transit and parks work?
No, so we're doing an office.
Yeah.
In there,
Yeah,
so
okay.
there's
All right.
there's that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question, though.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the quarterly report? These quarterly reports are fantastic, by the way. It's, I can't believe we didn't have them before. Like, it just keeps us in the loop, which is great. So if questions do come up, please reach out to the CAO to ask those questions. 11.3, Pearl Street infrastructure. So just a reminder to the public, we had Pearl Street residents came and raised some concerns about Pearl Street. So staff went away and did some research, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Engineering.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. Patrick put an image, I guess it's the last page of the report, up on your screen. However, we did rotate it to make it a little larger and hopefully a little clearer. So so this would be Victoria Road. Pearl Street is actually here and around. As Mayor Mitchell said, on November 9th at the council meeting, council asked that we come back with some more information with regards to the infrastructure. Pearl Street is classified as a local road, and it has low traffic volumes. Approximately 3/4 of the street is within town, so this yellow line here is actually the town boundary. So this portion is within town. A quarter of it being outside in the municipality. The street right-of-way varies, and it's probably hard to see, but the white lines here are the right-of-way. And as you get close to Victoria Road, of course, the right-of-way narrows. So between the trail and Victoria Road, the right-of-way is actually about half the width of, I guess, our standard for a local street. The driving surface ranges in width from about 4.3 meters to about 5.6 meters inside town and about 6 meters outside of town. And there are no sidewalks on Pearl Street. So this street is paved from Victoria Road. So it does contain asphalt from here up to about the top of the hill. We recently repaved this area this past construction season. We stayed away from here intentionally because of the proposed development at 54 Pearl Street. The remainder of Pearl Street is a bit of combination of asphalt millings as well as gravel. And the street consists of open ditches and cross culverts. So as far as the underground infrastructure, there is a larger diameter water main from Victoria Road up to the trail as well as a sewer in this area. And there's a large diameter water main from Highway 325 over and through the woods in this area. And these, I guess, pinkish type lines are actually small diameter private water laterals that serve 2 dwellings. So 11 of the 17 dwellings have sewer on Pearl Street, and 15 have water connections. So the blue stars are the water connections, the green stars are the sewer. In comparison to other areas of town, there's about 10 other streets in town that are not constructed to current standards, and 10 dwellings that do not have water, and about 30 dwellings that do not have town sewer. And staff have prepared an estimate to bring Pearl Street up to current standards, which would include pavement, curb, sidewalks, and all 3 underground infrastructures, so water, storm, and sanitary. And it's just in excess of $4 million.
Are you pausing for effect, or is that the end of the presentation?
I assume there are some questions.
Are there? Other questions? And, I mean, I don't know if it's a question. I recall back when Eric Shaw was the director of planning, we were talking about Foley Lane, and the question came up every year about curb and gutter, and it was one of the, well, I think it was the last time that Foley Lane came up, that it was finally explained in a way, at least that I think the council of the day, it just clicked, and that was that that open ditch is not necessarily substandard to curb and gutter. That open ditch, especially on a street like Foley Lane, for example, did exactly what it was supposed to do, dealing with the management of stormwater. And so, to me, I think that there's some streets that curb and gutter and sidewalk is vital because it's just that natural. Like, people are coming and going all the time. Like for example, Glen Allen, you wouldn't have no curb or gutter or sidewalk on Glen Allen just because hundreds and hundreds of people are walking that street every day. But I'm just wondering, should we have another standard? And again, I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting a substandard, but another standard that just recognizes that some of the streets that, to me, it should be paved, and there should be some amenities to it, but an open ditch, for example, is not necessarily a bad thing.
I mean, certainly the open ditch is your storm sewer. It's, it's not uncommon. The business park, for example, I mean, there's large areas of town that have open ditches as the storm sewer. So I guess as the standard since I've been here has been working toward asphalt and curb and gutter, which means storm sewer, pipe storm sewer. Those projects that did not have curb and storm sewers were identified in the capital budget for quite some time. But it's, I guess, prioritization of council as to which projects they focus their investment on each year. And certainly Pearl Street is a low volume street, and I guess assuming that investments would be focused on, like you said, the higher volumes, the higher use, the types of use, types of traffic, etc. But we could look at other standards if that's the wish of council. I guess researching the criteria as to what standards would meet which criteria would probably be the discussion points.
Because I wonder if it's an easy excuse to make it just go, $4 million, that's not going to happen. Versus, well, if we got it to here, right? I can just see it, this council, the next council, 25 years from now, every council has said it's $4 million, of course inflation, so at some point it's $5 million and $6 million. So it's never worth doing. And the majority of people would agree and say for $4 million, that seems like a really high price tag. But if the standard was just a little bit different, we could chip away at those. I think Councilor Thorburns raised a number of times just being able to chip away at these little projects. So
I mean, there are components of that could be done. I guess the question is, what's the end result? Because some components would need to be done before others. You may not want to pave the street if you know you're going to put an underground pipe system in, but you could pave the street and not necessarily have the curb, not necessarily have the sidewalk. That $4.3 million is for everything. And in this situation, the sewer or wastewater collection system would be expensive because we'd likely need a pumping station at around $1.2 million just for that. So you could take components of that, I guess, and do some upgrades. And that was listed in previous budgets. There was, the resurfacing, for example, of Pearl Street was in the budget for quite some time. It was not selected to be done. But in the meantime, since that was there, we had issues, and we've tried like the asphalt millings on the steep slopes to help prevent eroding. So we've tried some different treatments to help minimize the potholes and the erosion.
Would an open ditch function properly on that road, or like is there an advantage of having curb and gutter on Pearl Street, like for the nature of the road and the volume and?
Well, it's open ditch now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Is there an advantage?
Like our washouts, is there any like?
Not really. I mean, if you were to do curb, you wouldn't necessarily, if you were to do curb, you would have to do components of the storm sewer, because of course you have to collect the water that's being captured on the road and disperse of it. You wouldn't necessarily have to, I guess, provide independent pipe systems to each home. If you're going to do a sidewalk, you know, you have to have the space, so likely you're going to have some type of pipe system on part of the road to create that space for sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I guess there's combinations of possibilities.
Councilor McDonald?
So there are no stormwater issues that you're aware of right now?
No.
Deputy Mayor Tanner?
Where does that water line at the top left go? Does it go over to Frank's Lane?
Yes.
Way over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Bergier?
No,
Councilor McDonald?
So not every street in town has sidewalks. What triggers adding sidewalks, and would this road typically trigger a sidewalk? Call for a sidewalk, I don't know what the word is there.
The standard had changed a number of years ago. Local streets did not have sidewalks up until just a few years ago, I guess 2014. So that was a change that the town made. Otherwise, this would not have a sidewalk. So it's just, I guess, the way that we were moving forward, hoping to provide, I guess, a consistent approach to all streets within towns, same standard type thing.
Councilor Thorburn?
That is a true example of uphill both ways. You got to pump it up for the sewer and pump it up for the water. So, but Barry, you've got on that same report, there's another bunch of streets in town that's not built to standards. But are there any other streets in the town, with the exception of Pearl Street, that are not paved, that you can think of?
That are not paved.
At least have paving. And my follow-up question would be, could we at least be allowed or look at the possibility of, at some point in time, of paving what we own onto it and getting rid of the gravel up on top of the hill? Without curbs, without gutter, but at least a solid base surface that we can plow in the wintertime and get rid of the potholes.
So that could be something that could be debated at the budget, right?
Yeah,
so
if council wishes to add something.
I think Councilor Thorburn asking that at least the paving perhaps be put in the budget so that we can debate whether it stays in the budget or not.
Right.
Yeah. So that's something that's doable. I believe our Director of Community Development.
I just wanted to add that from the conversation around the active transportation plan earlier this evening, that some of the first actions are looking at considering AT on all road types, and so that first action to sort of look at how people move on the different types of roads. So Pearl Street would fall into one of those categories of some of our pre-incorporation roads. That handful that we have, they're very old roads and don't come close to our standards. How would we accommodate people moving, walking, rolling, biking on that road? So that can help and feed into engineering's process and considering treatments for Pearl Street. So I just want to bring that connection between the AT plan and how we assess our streets.
All with the limited financial resources that we have at our disposal. It would be great if, like, the province, for example, maybe you've heard of this in other communities where the province, paves roads and plows roads.
They do. They do.
No. Just not in town.
Is it just?
No.
That's my terrible attempt at sarcasm. Yes, if we were a rural municipality, we wouldn't be having this discussion because the road would probably be paved.
We'd be writing a letter instead.
Yeah, sternly worded one. Are there any other questions for Pearl Street? Yes?
On the sewer and water, so some of these residents, I'm assuming, have septics and wells. Has there ever been any conversations with any of them about whether they would like to have town services, or if they're happy with them, or is, because we don't have any requirements requiring them to have town services, is that right?
There's no requirement to have town water. In the sewer bylaw, there are some requirements, but if you're located a set distance away from the service that we could provide, then there's some I guess, exceptions. And there is also a number of homes within town that have approved on-site sewage treatment systems. And once they fail, then they would be required to connect to our system.
Okay, so the goal is for everyone to be connected.
That's a good question.
That reminds me to my question. When I drove that several times, it looks like some development down at the bottom of the hill that's still in town. Has that property owner requested water or sewer?
Water.
Water? And so it's probably likely that we could supply water because you're pretty close to there anyway.
We've provided, if you're talking...
it's on the
in this
left-hand side going down the hill.
Yeah.
In that area?
Yeah.
He's been provided information on costings for providing water. It would be similar to the other two homes. It would be long private laterals. And he can, he can evaluate that and determine, I guess, if he wants the service.
Yeah, I just had a question, not to deal with Pearl Street, but not necessarily infrastructure. I just recall from the meeting that night, some resident asking about road signage, and my memory doesn't serve me well what that particular signage was, but if we have in our notes, they said that they had attempted a couple times about, I don't know if it was to do with road safety, some more signage. Like I say, I don't recall exactly, but I remember that conversation coming up that particular night about signage, and maybe that will be in the minutes, I don't know, but if anybody else remembers them.
Brought that up.
Pardon?
Culligan brought that up.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was hidden driveway, or there was something that they talked about. And
I recall them showing the local deliveries only truck sign.
Yeah,
and then
but there was
I think
something
they were
else.
questioning how the construction vehicles could go up a road where it was local delivery only, but then the response is, that is local delivery.
But there was something else.
But maybe there was
something else.
There was something else there.
Around safety, and
child safety or something.
Yeah.
There was a request to have it reviewed for a driveway. There was concerns about safety, and staff are looking at that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Councilor McDonald.
When you say long private laterals, that's no longer sounding like town-owned services to me. Is that they own it and they have to maintain it?
Yes.
Why would we choose that option rather than hooking them up to our system, which is converting gold?
Because we don't actually have a system.
Right.
So our system, or the PSC system in this case, ends here.
Right.
So over the years, there's been, I guess, agreements made that these people could hook up privately as well as this one. And it's felt that a similar type of situation could occur for that person as well.
Yeah, it's very good with the location.
Other questions? So this will undoubtedly be something that we discuss probably around budget time as we go through the list of capital projects and prioritize, and I can say with some certainty that the whole meal deal is not going to be done at $4 million, but we'll see where it lands as we go through the budget process. So, thank you, Mr. Feener, for that. Our last item of business is Public Service Commission of Bridgewater Town Guarantee the debenture. So when a debenture is issued, the town does have to guarantee it for the Public Service Commission. So this is routine. And I don't want you to feel obligated to read this, Councilor Thorburn, but it is now borderline tradition that you read any motion that begins with whereas.
Okay, Your Worship. Thank you. Whereas the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater is a body corporate pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 59 of the Statutes of Nova Scotia 1993, And whereas the said Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has resolved to borrow by the issue and sale of debentures a sum of $160,000 for the purpose of water systems. And whereas the said Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has requested the town of Bridgewater to guarantee the principal and interest of said debentures when sold pursuant to Section 89 of the Municipal Government Act. Be it therefore resolved that subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the town of Bridgewater to guarantee the principal and interest of debentures of the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater in the amount not exceeding $160,000 when issued and sold, and that the mayor and clerk or CAO are authorized to do all things and execute all documents necessary to give the effect of this resolution.
Thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. Any discussion?
Question.
And question be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I'd like to thank everyone for an exciting 2020. Once again, welcome Councillor Conklin and Councillor Colwell for to the next 4 years when we round out this year. And thanks to staff for an exceptional year during exceptional times. And finally, I just want to thank our community. I'm unbelievably impressed with how this community has navigated this pandemic through the compassion they have for others, the businesses that have stepped up and donated generously, hearing that the support from at the food bank is just incredible, and speaking to Vicki at Souls Harbor and how they're managing, and the community is essentially really looking out for each other, and it makes it so much easier as we sit around this table to manage the day-to-day operations of the town, knowing that the people are part of that solution. I look to where my family lives in Ontario, and dare I say it is chaos. And the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and people are fighting, and politicians are fighting, and it's just, then we look at what we have here, and not just in Bridgewater or Lunenburg County, but if you look around the province, we are just all rowing in the same direction. So it's, I'm looking forward to 2021. My goodness, it can't be as bad as 2020. And like I said, maybe the province knows the pandemic's over on the 31st of March, so we'll see. But thank you for a great year. I have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor Frazier. We are adjourned. And we have a quick